I am the terror that flaps in the night. I am the notification bell that you should ring to see my future videos. I am Andre, and I'm a black nerd, and I'm talking about Darkwing Duck and DuckTales. Thank you so much for checking out my channel. If you like geeky pop culture, both nostalgic and new, then make sure you subscribe to this channel and click that bell so you can be notified of future videos that I do. But today I want to talk about a brand new episode of the reboot series of DuckTales that all has to deal with Darkwing Duck. And there's trouble you call DW, Darkwing Duck. Now, before I get too deep into this, I will let you know there will be some spoilers, but Disney XD's official YouTube channel put up the entire episode. The entire episode is on YouTube. So obviously I was a big fan growing up of the Disney afternoon. DuckTales, Rescue Rangers, Darkwing Duck, Goof Troop, all of those cartoons were a lot of fun. And just like everything I loved back in the day, they all get rebooted. So DuckTales came out in 2017 as a reboot of the original series, and it has been knocking it out the park left and right. I haven't done like a full episode by episode recap because I don't really do a lot of those anymore. But let me just say that this is one of the best reboot cartoons I have seen ever. It is so good. It is so strong. It has so many great references, not only to classic DuckTales stuff, but they've referenced Gummy Berry Juice, the Rescue Rangers, Don Carnage from Tailspin, the Mighty Ducks, Daisy Duck, Goofy, and Max and Roxanne. They reference the comics, they reference the classic cartoons, they reference the Disney Afternoon. They've basically created their own universe, a Disney Afternooniverse. That's what I'm calling it. That's its official name, trademark. And this show has constantly been peppering in references and storylines related to Darkwing Duck. Now, Darkwing Duck and DuckTales back in the day kind of were connected. They had Gizmo Duck in a couple of episodes of the classic series, and then of course Launchpad being in both DuckTales and Darkwing Duck. The reboot of DuckTales initially started out Darkwing Duck as a television show that was one of Launchpad and Dewey's favorite shows, and they even had an actor playing Darkwing Duck, Jim Starlin. Darkwing Duck becomes a movie later, and they recast with a new actor, and that makes the original actor, Jim Starlin, upset. The episode's called The Duck Knight Returns. If you haven't seen it, it's a really good episode. You should check it out. In that episode, we see who the new Darkwing Duck is, who just happens to be named Drake Mallard, who of course was the name of the alter ego of Darkwing Duck in the original series. So a really good nod there. They even do a really cool nod where Jim Starlin, who was the original Darkwing Duck in this new version of DuckTales, gets mad at Drake Mallard being the new Darkwing Duck, and then from a freak explosion, his colors change on his suit, and he gets really upset, and he basically becomes Negaduck, who was the negative version of Darkwing Duck from the original series. Did you get all that? There's a lot of talk about Darkwing Duck. But then Drake Mallard, who played Darkwing Duck, becomes Darkwing Duck for real as a real life superhero in DuckTales. And that's what leads to this episode, Let's Get Dangerous, which introduces Goslin and brings back some of the classic Darkwing Duck characters. This episode was amazing. I freaking loved this episode. This show, again, it just does a great job of just making these references fan service, but also storytelling. Makes sense and works for a new audience. So it plays on those different layers. I just don't know how this show does it so well, where they can do an episode with references, and if you don't know the references, it's still a good story. But if you do know the references, it's like a little bit extra additional thing for you to enjoy and be like, oh, I see where you got that from. So in the episode, Scrooge, Huey, Dewey, and Louie go meet up with Taurus Bulba. Taurus Bulba, one of the villains from the original Darkwing Duck. But in this one, he's a scientist that works for Scrooge McDuck, and he's making this new invention called the Ramrod. After I watched this episode, I actually went back and watched the original Darkwing Duck pilot, the two-parter, and Taurus Bulba is the main villain in that episode, and he's trying to steal a device in that episode called the Ramrod. Now, the Ramrod in the original Darkwing Duck series was a gravity flotation device, which he was just going to use to steal money from banks. But in this new version of DuckTales, the Ramrod that Taurus Bulba creates is a reality alternating mechanism, which allows him to grab things from, he claims, out of nowhere and make it reality. But what we find out later on in the episode, he's actually stealing it from other dimensions, which of course is causing a dimensional rift. Because once you start taking things from one dimension to another, that's gonna start causing some problems. He also apparently had a partner who was Gosalyn's grandfather, which was interesting because there was a whole storyline about Gosalyn's grandfather in the original Darkwing Duck series. Gosalyn, of course, is trying to figure out what's going on with Bulba and where her grandfather is, because while everyone thinks that he's an upstanding citizen, Gosalyn's got Bulba all figured out, knows that he's a villain, and knows that he's the reason why her grandfather is missing. At the same time, Launchpad and Dewey meet up with Darkwing Duck, and they realize that he's not really doing a lot of crime prevention because there's not any crime in St. Canard that's going on at the time. This, of course, leads to Darkwing meeting Gosalyn, them finding about Taurus Bulba's evil scheme, and then trying to stop it. But in doing so, Bulba says, well, how do you attack Darkwing? You bring in his villain. So he opens up a dimensional portal to the Darkwing TV show dimension and brings out the notorious villains Liquidator, Megavolt, Quackerjack, and Bushroot. Did you get all that? There's a lot of talk about Darkwing Duck. It was really cool to see these characters again, and they were very reminiscent to the original Darkwing Duck characters. I think in one case they even used the original voice. But man, Bushroot is scary now. Like, Bushroot used to be this whole like, I'm a mumbling guy and I don't want to be a bad guy, but I'm a scientist and this happened to me. I turned into a plant, kind of a reference to Poison Ivy. But Bushroot in the new DuckTales series, he's silent. He has like no pupils. He's got the Ninja Turtle eyes going on and all these plants start popping out. I'm like, oh dang, man, this is kind of a horror film now. But the other characters were pretty much the same. Quackerjack still their Joker, you know, Megavolt doing all the electricity thing, and Liquidator, they even got him down to doing the advertising slogans, because if you remember, he was a salesman that got turned into liquid, and so he always would do like the whole operators are standing by, call now, your money back, like that kind of salesman jargon. He's doing that in the episode, which I think was really cool. There is a lot of meta humor in this episode. There's one point when they do something really cool and Launchpad was like, that was a really cool thing we did with Darkwing Duck. I mean, not as cool as the original TV series, but still pretty cool. I was like, I see what you did there. There's a point where Gosalyn has a flashback telling about what happened with her and her grandfather, and in the flashback she's wearing the Gosalyn shirt from the original Darkwing Duck series, but then even though they updated her outfit for this series, she still has the #1 on her jackets. Those are little things, but they mean a lot, you know? They even go down to actually referencing specific episode numbers and titles. They give a nod to Just Us Ducks, where they talk about how it was an underrated crossover episode, and even playing onto that theme, Gizmo Duck actually shows up in this episode as well. And throughout the episode, people are dropping dialogue that are lyrics from the Darkwing Duck theme song. When there's trouble, you call DW. Daring Duck and Mystery, champion of right. It's just really cool they do that. And of course, they say multiple times, let's get dangerous. And gotta do, of course, that I am the terror that flaps in the night and all that kind of stuff. I just love that they really honed in on just all those little elements that made Darkwing Duck so cool. It's just really cool that they're doing this. I don't know, man. I kind of get the vibe that they trying to set up a spinoff. Like the fact that they had this special and the fact that they keep putting all these Darkwing Duck elements into DuckTales, I like to suspect that they are trying to be like, look, can we just, you know, the DuckTales Darkwing Duck hour, can we make that happen? I would be down for that happening. I would never know when it would air, because I never know when this show airs on Disney Channel or Disney XD or Disney whatever. Am I gonna have to buy this thing off of iTunes? I probably am. This episode not only references Darkwing Duck, but it references other Disney things as well. Bonkers. They have a reference to Bonkers in this episode. I freaked out. They were showing this police footage of what the villains were doing, and the policeman that they have in that footage, once upon a time in Toontown, there was a cat that had it all. Fortune and fame, top of the game, up until he hit the wall. They had Bonkers up in there. You know, Bonkers. That's all I gotta say. Why would there be a reason to reference Bonkers? DuckTales finds a reason. Life finds a way. There's also a nice reference to the classic DuckTales in this episode. Taurus Bulba at one point throws Scrooge McDuck, Huey, Dewey, and Louie into a different dimension, and the dimension kind of looks like the classic DuckTales. They even make Huey, Dewey, and Louie look like their classic forms from the original series, where they look a little bit different, obviously, now in the new show. The sea monster ate my ice cream. This show did a deep cut that broke my brain. So Gosalyn eventually figures out that Taurus Bulba threw her grandfather into another dimension, but they don't know which dimension that he's in. And she has to make that decision, of course, at some point. Do I keep looking for my grandfather, even though every time I'm doing so, I'm causing more of a dimensional rift between worlds? Or do I just say, look, he's just gone, I give up? There's a point where she's looking through a computer for the different dimensions, and they show different images. And there's one image that popped up and my brain just broke. I was like, wait a minute, why do I remember that? It was these cute little cartoon dogs. They were like different colors. And I was like, what is this? And I literally went, wasn't there like a show called Fluffy Dogs or something? And so I look it up And it was actually not Fluffy Dogs, it was Fluffy Dogs. It was this one-time special that Disney aired back in the 80s about these dogs that would be able to jump through different dimensions, which is kind of funny to make that reference in this episode, which is dealing with going through different dimensions. There was a lot of times in the 80s where they would make these specials that were basically pilots to see if the show would work well to make it an entire series. It didn't work for Fluffy Dogs. Apparently didn't do good in the ratings from what I looked up. So they never made the show into a full series, but they still had that one episode that aired from time to time. And not only was it crazy for them to make such a deep cut, but it was also crazy that this one thing that aired years ago, I knew all the way down to the name except for 2 letters. That's freaky. Like, I don't know why I remembered Fluffy Dogs. This thing only had one special. How did I remember that? I called it Fluffy Dogs, but I still kind of knew what it was. And that scares me now. I'm worried about my brain right now. I cannot remember a lot of things, yet for some reason in the back of my mind, I remember Fluffy Dogs so much that them showing this one image brought it back. That's scary. That scares me. I called it Fluffy, still scary enough. Obviously, I really like this episode for the Darkwing Duck stuff, for the other Disney reference stuff, and for the fact that the show continues to just be really good at playing into the fan service, but at the same time, being able to tell an engaging story. They've been having an ongoing story about Fowl, which is obviously the evil organization from Darkwing Duck. They brought that into this series in a different type of way. It's all connected, and it's nice to see that even with this episode, with doing all the Darkwing Duck fan service, they were able to continue that story as well. And it just shows how good the writing is on the show. It's also still funny. It's a lot of good comedy. The voice acting is great. Very good episode, and I'm so glad that they put the episode out on YouTube for everybody to see it. It's a very good episode. I think this is a really good one to watch that you can watch on its own and enjoy the show even if you've never watched the show, but I think it's also a good one to show how good this show is. If you haven't seen the new DuckTales before, I highly recommend it. I gotta be real with you though, I have not kept up with this show because I never know when it airs. I never know when it airs. So I've been trying to catch up on the episodes I missed on Disney Plus. The first 2 seasons are on Disney Plus. The 3rd season is not on there yet. I'm assuming they're gonna probably add it sometime after the season ends. But at least with this one episode, you do get it for free. And I think the pilot episode of DuckTales, the very first episode of the new series, is also available as well. If it is, I'll put a link in there. I'll put a link to any full episodes I can find that are legally on YouTube. Because I'm sure there's some full episodes on YouTube as well, but I don't think they're supposed to be there. They ain't Disney official. Very good job to the DuckTales team, and I hope that if this was an attempt to try to get a Darkwing Duck spinoff going, I hope that you succeed. I hope that we do get a full Darkwing Duck series and then do more stuff with Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers. I heard there's a movie coming out, so we at least have that. Now, if there was only another animated series that I grew up with that I really liked, and it showed me some new footage from a reboot version of it that I could love so much because I would feel like it is honoring the tradition of the original series while still being new. If there was only another show like that. Thank you for watching this episode. If you are a fan of DuckTales and Darkwing Duck, whether classic or new, let me know. Let me know what you thought about this episode. Are there any references that you noticed in this episode that I missed? Or what are some of your favorite references from this DuckTales series in general? I'd love to know. What do you hope they reference next? And if you like my channel, then I hope you subscribe, like this video, and check out more videos I make in the future. Thank you so much. I love you like a play cousin. I'm Audi 5000. Let's get dangerous.